In 2017, a series of limited conversations between an unknown music producer who went by the name Begotten and a record label owner named Dennis would lead to the upload of 6 disturbing albums. These conversations and the bizarre circumstances behind them would be documented online upon the release of each album. For a while, fans of the project believed the music and the story of Begotten was over. All 6 projects were released in a 2-year span, and ever since 2019, it's been radio silence from the worrisome online producer. Until now. On October 6th of 2023, a 7th release in the Begotten discography has surfaced 4 years later, out of nowhere. If you aren't up to date with the events surrounding this producer, check out my video here, which goes extensively into all 6 of these releases and the crazy stories behind them. But if you don't want to sit through a almost hour-long deep dive, I'll try and summarize everything up for you real quick so we can head right into this latest and possibly weirdest release yet. You can check out today's video topic in written form over at Vapor95 and their DarkNet blog. Check out their awesome shop as well for some cool merch, apparel, and much more. So this story starts all the way back in 2017 with a dude named Dennis. And Dennis is an owner of an online music label called Geometric Lullaby, and he is also a frontman of the band Ghost Bath. And Dennis would create a thread on a forum in efforts to find new artists for their label. The label's motto, a collection of songs about life and death. Shortly after this, Dennis would receive a message from an artist named Begotten, along with 6 fully complete albums and accompanying artwork all ready to go. The producer used the term hush wave to describe the sound of the music. Its twisting of sample material elevated with hazy and lethargic sound design was simply infectious. The music branched off of the infamous internet-conjured genre known as vaporwave, a production style where artists twist and bend existing songs to create all new soundscapes and themes, accompanied by, of course, a retro aesthetic. With hush wave and what Begotten was creating, the sounds were uncanny, haunting, but calming all at the same time. Broken and distorted artwork featuring skeletons and vivid textures for the aesthetic. A 2-year release cycle would see all 6 Begotten albums find a home on the label, along with a dedicated and beloved fan base following along for whatever came next. During this time, and all the releases of the albums, the relationship between Dennis and Begotten would get quite weird, to say the least. Mysterious packages and bloody letters in the mail, confusing music videos sent to Dennis, and even Dennis sending out a personal friend for what he believed to be a meetup with the unknown producer in a graveyard, only to end in the friend pretending the whole event didn't even happen. Like I said, there's a whole lot of history to unpack, but just to sum it up so we can get into this video, the producer has seemingly disappeared since 2019, until now. As of the present day, Dennis had almost forgotten about Begotten entirely. The artist slowly slipped from his mind, replaced by the countless emails, music making, touring, and other projects he was involved in. His band Ghost Bath would hit the road once more in the US and Canada in 2023, and Dennis recalls the tour going amazing. They were playing packed and sold out rooms, having the time of their lives. That was until they hit Georgia. The staff who was supposed to be taking care of the show were extremely late, and the venue was strange and the stage was tiny and barely anybody showed up to the show. And this of course happens from time to time with any band. So on that night in Georgia, Ghost Bath would play their set, and Dennis would step outside to cool off for a bit and mingle with his bandmates and fans. Not long after, someone reached their hand out to him and said, "I enjoyed your music." Dennis replied, "Thank you," and shook their hand. He recalls the person looking at him for a moment too long. Something about the way they stared at him began to make him feel uncomfortable. Dennis nodded at them and smiled, hoping they would move along. The person then leaned in closer to him. "I'm Begotten," they said. Dennis laughed and shook his head when he heard this. This wasn't the first time someone joked with him at a show about Begotten. Most of the time it never bothered him, but on this night, he was already a bit annoyed by the way the show went. He replied sarcastically to the claim, "Sure, so you know my label then?" "I can prove it," the person replied, and then held up their phone. That's when they showed Dennis their email address. It looked legit enough, and Dennis started to get nervous for some reason. Even upon seeing the email, Dennis still had his doubts. Dennis opened his own phone and sent an email to that same address that had contacted him all those years ago, and sure enough, it showed up in their inbox right then and there on that phone. This person was Begotten. Dennis didn't even know how he should react. He offered to buy them a drink and they obliged. Luckily, the place had some semi-private seating with large wooden walls surrounding booths, and the two took a seat. The conversation that followed began with a lot of questions from Dennis, obviously, but mostly he was just in awe. This was the last thing he ever expected to happen, and despite the poor quality of the show, his mood flipped on its head. Dennis was ecstatic and, of course, curious. The conversation ranged from more about the producer's creation process, how Begotten found the Geometric Lullaby label in the beginning, and then delved into deeper, more philosophical topics. A lot about mental health, Dennis recalls. And this would have been the happy ending we all wanted. Begotten, alive and well, good conversation, but that wouldn't be the case here. During the conversation, something came up that rubbed Dennis the wrong way. Begotten continually mentioned a group of individuals that they had been speaking with. At first, Dennis dismissed this seemingly unimportant fact. It was nothing of note to him. The more Begotten spoke of them, though, the more concerning it all became. They were described as a collective of sorts, a mysterious number of artists and philosophers who created music. It wasn't until the mention of a manifesto and a set of rules and commandments that Dennis started to take note of it all. Begotten had supposedly met them online through the contact point on their Bandcamp page. Begotten spoke of them so highly and claimed that they were all extremely excited, as they were all going to meet in real life for the first time in October. Dennis did not have much time to explore the topic, unfortunately, as he was being called by his bandmates to come help tear down the stage and load the trailer. As of right now, Dennis doesn't want to reveal the name of the group that he thought resembled more of a cult in many ways. He didn't know enough about them yet, and he didn't want to misrepresent them or give them unneeded attention. Before he could bid his farewell, Begotten offered Dennis an album, Death Cycle. Apparently, they had been sitting on it for quite a while, created when they were in a very dark place. The two hammered out the details for the release fairly quickly, and Dennis knew he was about to get his hands on something very special and very personal. Dennis was beyond happy, a swing of moods from depressed to ecstatic in such a short period of time. A new Begotten release was here, 4 years later, seemingly out of thin air. The burst of energy would surely help him in loading all of the equipment out of the venue. "Thank you for coming out to meet me," Dennis said before standing up. Begotten then looked at him with a strange intensity. They reached out with a crumpled piece of lined paper, placing it in Dennis's hand, and then stared at Dennis for one last, long moment, and walked away. Dennis left the secluded table and unraveled the crinkled paper. "Help me," was written in blue pen. Dennis's heart sank. He ran to where Begotten had walked, but they were nowhere to be found. He sprinted to the parking lot, his eyes shooting in all directions. "Begotten," he called out, only to hear nothing but silence in return. Two of his bandmates lugged a speaker cabinet out from the door beside him. "Can we get some help here?" they said. The bandmates had no clue of the significance of everything that had just transpired. Dennis was at a loss for what to do. He didn't know whether to make a search party or call someone for help. All he knew was that he had to do something. The album Dennis received that night, Death Cycle, would be released to the public on Friday, October 6th. 20 tracks, a solid amount to please the appetite of any Begotten fan, accompanied with the latest story and mysterious texts that have also been featured in previous Begotten releases. I'll of course leave a link in the description below for anyone who wants to check everything out for themselves. Everyone knows a Begotten release isn't just about the music. The Bandcamp page itself is an experience, which is an aspect I've always loved about this producer and how Geometric Lullaby handles these releases. The album opens up with the track Drowned, a murky and ancient beat that descends us into the depths of what the rest of this album has to offer. The distorted and growling Fascination follows right after, a track that contrasts itself with pockets of isolated, reverb-soaked guitar. The album is perfect for Halloween time. Tracks like Poltergeist and its vocal samples, Boiling, brings us right alongside a cracking fire in the middle of a cold October night, sitting next to a friend who's fell into a trance with his acoustic guitar, plucking away into the night for eternity. Or how about Ribcage, with its distant bellowing sound terrain? This seventh album takes a little bit of each of the previous 6 albums and blends them all together. There are even brighter, more vivid moments on here too, Solemn and Decayed with their pretty vocal samples, and Tearfall, a track that is perfectly pretty with shiny chimes and splashy snares. To put it simply, this album is the perfect release for Begotten fans. The album blends darker, harsher textures with these pretty tranquil moments that all showcase the beauty of the Halloween season. That blend of cozy autumn nights with genuine horror shrouded in mystery. The album was also released with 2 limited edition vinyl pressings, 333 copies of the Pink Luminescence and 333 copies of Electric Neon Blue. As of the writing of this video, all of the blue copies are sold out and only about 30 pink LPs are left. I'm pretty sure they'll all be sold out by the time I put this video out. But if they aren't, definitely go check the page out. Geometric Lullaby always does a stellar job with their physical releases, and this one I'm sure will be no different. For a story that seemed to wrap up years ago, the mystery of Begotten now only feels like it's just getting started. The only question is now, what will happen next, and when will we get that next release?
I just